Life is full of tough choices. What job should we work? What kind of car should we drive? Is a hot dog a sandwich or a taco? But maybe the toughest choice is how to upgrade our favorite commander deck. Welcome to Head Games.
Greetings and salutations, everybody. My name is a Zombie Apocalypse, but my upgraded name is actually just Steve.
Hello again, friends and opponents. I'm Jetterex, the last surviving monkey from a troop that recently escaped from an evil laboratory. R.I.P. Mr. Jingles and Six-Toed Sam. The other monkeys call me Tim.
Oh, sweet. Well, we need to get back away from this monkey business, and we actually need to start talking about what we're actually doing. So, thank you. Thank you for joining us today on the Head Games Commander podcast, where we talk about the Magic the Gathering Commander format. Tim, what are we talking about today?
So, we have a lot of commanders, or a lot of commander decks, right? And it seems like Wizards just keeps printing cards like crazy over and over, super, super fast. It's honestly impossible to keep up at this point. So recently, we finally managed to take some time to upgrade a few of our existing decks, and we thought it would be fun to talk about that process.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So we each picked one of the decks that we recently upgraded to talk about. We're going to explore the theme changes, the card choices, and how we feel about the finished product.
Yep, and today we're gonna let Zombie go first. So talking about his deck. So the first question is, can you talk a little bit about what is your general approach to upgrading decks under normal circumstances?
So the reason why I choose to upgrade a deck is if I haven't picked up the deck in a while, there's a reason why. So I think that's when I decide, okay, now is a good time to spice up the life a little bit. You got to keep your relationships fresh. You got to give them fancy new toys and stuff to keep things fresh. So that's what I decided I wanted to do. I didn't pick up my my one deck for several months actually, and I thought it was time for a change.
Okay, so tell us what commander that you're talking about and what made you want to upgrade that specific deck.
So the commander I'm talking about is Sisay, Weatherlight Captain. She is a 3 mana, 2 and a white legendary human soldier. Sisay gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And then you can pay Wooburg to search your library for a legendary permanent card with mana value less than Sisay's power. Put that card onto the battlefield, then shuffle. So the reason why I wanted to change the deck was I think it got to the point where I was pulling on too many threads at once. I had one theme, which was all the permanents had to be legendary, or all the non-land permanents had to be legendary. And when you do something like that, and I had I had the shrines, all the shrines in there, so that tied up 17 of the cards. So it made it difficult to choose what the kind of secondary sub theme, because there's not too many legendary things that care about enchantments as much as I would have liked, right? So there was a few, and they were in the list, but there's just not enough to make it a full-blown legendary enchantress list. So I decided to just start pulling all other legendary creatures throughout Magic's history, and it was one half a historic deck and the other half was a shrines deck, and it felt like it was tugging too hard. So I decided to throw away the commander entirely. I thought that was the major problem. So the commander I changed it to was Buttercup, Provincial Princess. She is a 3 mana legendary creature, human soldier. She gets +1/+1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. And you can
that's interesting.
And you can also pay Wooburg to search your library for a legendary permanent card with mana value less than Buttercup's power. And that card would be put onto the battlefield, and then I would shuffle. So
But wait, Zombie, isn't that the same card?
it is. So So I decided to what I would do with this glam over is I decided to turn the deck into two separate decks. I bifurcated the pooling process. So I decided to make a Sisay or not a Ghost Shintai Shrine Tribal Enchantress list. And then I made a Buttercup's Guide to the Multiverse deck. So I changed what my card pool could be. So before it was just legendary permanents. So I changed the card pool to any cards from Universes Beyond. So there's not a single card in this list that isn't printed in a Universe Beyond set. Not a single card. Every single card in this list went from Magic the Gathering orientation to Universes Beyond.
So before you go on, like, do you think that that was a narrower restriction than the previous one?
So I have less cards to pull from, yes.
Okay.
But I have more utility cards that I didn't have before.
Okay.
So
Like what?
like I can use Birds of Paradise. I could use Soul Ring. I can use
Oh, okay.
so like my ramp is better. Like I have Soul Ring.
You have Arcane
I have
Signet.
Arcane Signet. I have
Yeah.
I have pretty cool removal too. And it was just I think the deck needed change, and going with the same old the same old shtick, but just without the shrines didn't seem as fun. So I wanted to really challenge myself with this deck list, and boy, it was a challenge, but it was a lot of fun.
So, I mean, you've talked a bit about already about, like, kind of moving into like what the new theme is. Like, as you started to work on the new list, did you see any other sub themes emerging? Because even with the
S-
Universes Beyond's card, there's enough of them at this point
Yeah.
that you probably could have geared it in a direction,
So
or
I
you could
actually
have geared it in a couple of different directions.
I definitely did. So
Right.
it is a +1/+1 counters / human tribal deck.
Okay.
There's other creatures that aren't humans, but the creatures that aren't humans are hella good, to put it lightly.
Hmm.
Yeah, so there's no thing that says all humans get +1/+1, I don't think. I might be wrong on that now that I'm thinking about it. Okay, I lied. There is definitely a humans matter card in the card deck, but
Okay. Yeah.
but like for the most part, it's just it still sticks to the historic theme. It still sticks to a little bit like token generation, and it sticks to
Sure.
honestly, like it's still a whole bunch of smaller themes that kind of clump together, but they're not
Hmm.
so far split, right? So before it was enchantments and legendaries. Now it's legendaries that happen to be humans that happen to do really cool things.
Yeah, so kind of some accidental synergy, but in your
Yeah,
previous description of the deck, it really did sound like it was being pulled in two distinct
it
directions,
was.
where
It was.
it's not just that you have, this theme and you accidentally have this other sub theme. It's like
Right.
you actually you're losing resources because you're pulled so
Correct.
specifically in these two directions that aren't necessarily overlapping as much as
Right.
you'd like them
So
to.
now
Okay.
my synergies do overlap, which is kind of nice. But this deck's
Right.
still
So they're
not
like
good. I want to make this perfectly clear. This deck
yeah,
will be fun.
it's
It will do
definitely
things, but it's not good because of
It's
the
definitely
restrictions.
it's a meme list. There's no
That's exactly
question.
what this
But
is.
I think that, like, with your play style and your kind of energy at a commander table and the way, what you're gonna bring when you play this list is gonna be fun for everybody. And I think that that's gonna be part of that game, right? Is that we talk a lot about, the kind of political or communication aspect of the commander game, but one of the ways that you can really get yourself forward is to be an enjoyable person at the table. And if you're bringing the multiverse madness here, you're bringing the universes beyond madness and kind of leaning into that shtick. I think people are gonna like kind of want to see what you're doing, and I
Look,
think that maybe earns you a little favor at the table.
and how often do you get to say, "Hey, Zangief is coming out of the doors of Doria, and I'm gonna equip Lucille to Zangief, and then attack with a Zangief with Lucille, which makes you sacrifice." Like the things that I will be able to say will just break Magic players' brains, and that's really what this deck is for.
So there's a high tilt factor here, but I think that can, under the right circumstances, lead to a pretty great gaming experience.
I mean, my ramp package is the 7 bobbleheads. Do I really need to say more?
Like, this is not news to me. He told me this earlier, and it's still very funny. Okay, so let's dive into some specific cards. So the first couple of itemized things we're going to talk about is in this case for this deck, since it's kind of a brand new list, I wanted to know what are the cards that were just auto includes for you, like the first cards you thought about that made the final cut, but that were there all along, never a chance of getting cut. Like what's the best of the best in this deck?
So a lot of the cards that I'm talking about actually won't be in the original list because they kind of had like a narrower theme that necessarily wouldn't have fit as well in the Shrine Tribals. And I just didn't have that. Well, I had some Universe Beyonds, but there's a lot more since the last time I've touched this. So the first card I really want to talk about is Wolverine, the best there is. What made me want to have this deck to start off with, and what kind of drove that need to want to make this list was I saw these secret layer drops, and I was like, well, I need to have them all, which I'm sad I don't. But that's a story for a different day. So I'm gonna have to be here buying singles that cost more than the secret layer themselves. I'm not salty or nothing. But anyway,
I just looked at the price on this card.
Yeah, $70. Yep.
Good grief.
Yeah, I'm so that's why I limited. I had actually all of them here in the original list, except for Iron Man. Now the only two that made it were Wolverine and Black Panther. They were the only two that survived that cut because I might be a whale, but I'm not that big a whale. Daddy's got to raise some kids. Anyway, let's read the card that I was excited to add first. So Wolverine, the best there is, he is a 3 mana, 1 and a red and a green mutant berserker hero. He has unrivaled lethality. He double all damage Wolverine would deal. And then at the beginning of each end step, if Wolverine was dealt damage to another creature this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on him. And then the last ability is to pay a colorless and a green to regenerate Wolverine. I mean,
regenerate. What does that mean?
All right. The next time he would be destroyed this turn, instead tap him, remove him from combat, and heal all damage that was on him. It's the backwards way of what regenerate should be. That's why they stopped making it, but it's close enough. It stops him from dying.
It's funny, like to see it like spelled out on a card like that, and in turn, for those of us with wrinkles and gray hair, like remember
as I show them off
being a thing.
Yeah.
So, okay, so why is this at the top of the list?
Because I mean, it's just this is the antithesis of like where Magic is going, and I'm kind of loving it. Right? Like I get more excited by the Universe Beyonds because how hilarious it makes the game than I am the regular sets. Right? I'm looking forward to that Spider-Man set. I'm looking forward to that SpongeBob Secret Lair. Like to me, that's hilarious. So this is just like the main card that was just like, all right, like this card's it's good on its own. And that's one of the things that I was looking for. A lot of the times with the cards, I was looking for cards that would be relatively decent on their own. I didn't want to have to rely on a different piece of cardboard in play, even though it's pretty easy for me to put two legendary things into play together because of my commander. I try not to rely on that ability too much. But if I had nothing to do, I'm going to do something, right? Like this deck doesn't have amazing card draw in it. It doesn't have like the most amazing thing. So I just wanted to give myself any opportunity to get the cards that I need. So, and plus Wolverine's a new card, and I really want to play with it.
I'm here for the just the novelty of having Wolverine on a card, and I think that the one thing I think most people would agree on in terms of the universes beyond cards is that they are typically very flavorful. Like they've done such a good job of adapting those characters into the game design of Magic, and here is yet another example of that. Here, like this, and I remember reading somewhere, I think that they wanted Wolverine to regenerate instead of having indestructible, because it is actually more flavorful. It's a kind of a worse ability in a lot of ways, but it does line up a little better with the way that the character's powers actually work. So I think that just the novelty of having Wolverine on the table is pretty strong here.
Yeah, and that's basically like what I was going for with like some of the picks are just like, yo, he's the hero of the story. That's why he's in this deck list, right?
Just so. Excellent.
Like I have villains in here too, and like two of the villains that are in here are only in here because they're the villains of the story. Like it's not necessarily because they're good or they support a theme very well, but like I have the Dark Lord Sauron in here, and I have Negan the Cold Blooded. Like these cards aren't amazing. Yeah, it's some removal in a way, and the other one's just a really big body who, whenever they cast spells, gives me a blocker or whatever. But like other than that, they're not really doing much for me. But sometimes a big body with ward is good enough, who makes creatures with +1/+1 counters on them. Like.
I mean, it guided your choices for sure. Like the kind of the theme matters more than picking high quality cards here. And and the good news is that there's still plenty of power, so you're still probably going to do something. I really can't wait to see it in action.
Oh yeah, I can't wait to play it next week. So the next card, did you have anything to add about Wolverine besides he's a very, very handsome short king?
Best there is.
He is the best there is. So the next card that I was super excited to add was Sean, Father of Synths. He is a 5-mana human scientist. He is 3 a blue and a red. It says whenever you attack, you may create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of target attacking legendary creature you control other than Sean. Except it's not legendary, and it's a synth artifact creature token in addition to its other types. When Sean leaves the battlefield, exile all synth tokens you control.
Yep.
So when you have all legendary stuff, mostly all legendary stuff, and they have cool abilities, it's cool to have more than one of those creatures. So, I don't know, just imagine a robot version of, Rick Steadfast Leader, or, Aragorn the Uniter, or, where else do I want to go? Like, or, Gloin the Dwarf Emissary. Like, having multiples of all these creatures is just value town that I can't seem to get away from.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that this card is, I forget that the design of this card is worded in such a way where as long as you have something on the board the turn you cast Sean, it's not when Sean attacks, it's when you attack. So any other creature attacking gets this trigger to resolve. Because oftentimes with cards such as this, if they're required to attack, you have to wait a turn to use it. Not the case with this one. You can immediately get a copy after you play it. So I think that really makes it playable because it's kind of a sneaky thing that they don't expect you to suddenly have yet another version of whatever legendary threat you have on the board, and then you first main phase Sean, now suddenly you've got 2 of that thing, and sometimes that creates a really, really powerful board state.
Hey Tim, just imagine a robot Zangief. Or like even just like the robot master multiplied. You don't get the initial myriad triggers, but holy moly, I will start making an enormous amount of masters multiplied.
Yeah.
because all
I
those tokens
mean,
will have myriads, and then I don't have to sacrifice those tokens, and it's just like,
there you go.
and that's just a cool story. That's what this deck's about. It's not about winning, it's about cool ass stories.
Yeah, it's about telling the weirdest possible story you can.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. So
Perfect.
the next card in the list that I was really excited to add, I actually added a lot of the Doctor Who cards because the one list was historic tribal. When you have
Right.
a whole bunch of legendary permanents, it turns out they're all historic. So the sixth Doctor is a 4, a green, and a blue. Time Lord Doctor. Whenever you cast the historic spell, copy it. Except it isn't legendary. This ability triggers only once each turn. So I do have to choose what I have to play first sometimes, and that's not always the best thing to do. Like sometimes you want to be able to cast a soul ring to get into
I see.
something bigger, and now
Yep,
I
I
have
see.
to like just do one thing maybe. So it's something I have to just keep an eye on that I'm not too super worried about. But like
I mean, double soul ring isn't the worst thing I've ever heard.
double soul ring's not the worst. 1 mana for 4 seems, or 4 mana for 1 seems pretty solid to me. So again, like all my legendaries, they do something that's good. Sometimes they do things on entering, sometimes they do things
Sure.
when attacking. So like just having multiple like having multiple Aragorn's uniters seems pretty solid to me. So like every spell that I cast, I'm getting like 3 things for, 5 things for. Well, those numbers don't make sense, but it would be 2 things for, 4 things for, 6 things for, depending on how many colors
Right.
the card is, right? So like just hell, like Rick Steadfast Leader is an anthem for all humans. Being able to cast that on top of and getting 2 of them, so all my creatures are now getting +4/+4, have vigilance, lifelink, and first strike. Seems pretty awesome to me. It seems like,
Yeah, so I mean, just in these last 2 cards, you've also, and maybe these are the only 2 that do it, but you have definitely emerged yet another subtle theme here that if you can create additional copies of any of the creatures you're playing in the deck, it's going to really kind of exponentially increase the power
Right.
level of all of those things. So multiple copies, the both of these last 2 cards create that effect.
there's only so many things I could add that does that are legendary and
Right.
in Universes Beyond,
Right.
but at least I got the things that were good and did it well. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
So the last we've been talking about them all night already. So
Yeah, I feel
now
like I
we're-
heard this one already.
so now we're gonna actually read them, which was Aragorn the United. This is a 5-color deck, so having all my spells. Oh, let's read the card. So it's for red, green, white, and blue. It is a noble human. Notice it's human as well. Whenever you cast a white spell, I create a 1/1 human white soldier. Whenever I cast a blue spell, I scry 2. Whenever you cast a red spell, he deals 3 damage to target opponent. And whenever I cast a green spell, I get +4/+4 to a single target. Target creature gets +4/+4 until end of turn. So, this card just says a lot of words, man. And
It does.
Aragorn the Uniter just says a lot of words. And
Yeah.
when most of my stuff are gold as in multiple colors, even like my 2 costs, like all my legendaries are like 2 color.
Are they? Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, I'm not surprised. I'm sure it shows up quite a lot.
But like most of my like things that have multiple colors, like just looking at 4, I have a 3 color, 3 color, 3 color, 1 color, 2 color. Like those are the thing. Like I'm going to be getting a lot of bonuses, and it's sad that black doesn't get anything, but it also makes sense. But like most of my stuff are 2 colors, so like just getting 2 things for casting a single spell. Again, this list was, I haven't touched this list since before Lord of the Rings, so like just I would have added this card beforehand, but it's just one of those things where I haven't picked this deck up in 6 months, or like I guess it almost is like 2 years. I haven't upgraded it, so turns out when there's a lot of new cards you can add, a lot of good things can happen.
Yeah, that's actually it's something that's come up a lot for me. It's when I think about the idea of upgrading decks and the general approach to it and how we kind of treat it. Like I definitely don't look at new sets as they come out with a what cards from this set are going to go in which of my commander decks. And I think that that is something that some people do. I'm not saying
Hmm.
that it's wrong. It's just for whatever reason, I play other formats as well, so I'm not necessarily looking with that lens. But I just don't find myself doing that. I really find myself kind of waiting, and then after a certain amount of time, then it does feel like I'm making a significant change where I'm not just
Right.
upgrading one card, I'm upgrading a handful, and
Right.
now the deck actually feels like it's operating a little bit differently. So I mean, I don't
I think that's
necessarily think
why
it's a
I wait
bad thing
too.
that the upgrades.
I
Yeah.
I like to wait a little bit. So instead of just doing one card at a time, it's like the whole like if you replace all the boards on a boat, is it the same boat? Analogy.
That's a philosophical question.
It's the same here. Is it the same? Is it the same deck?
Is
No.
it the same deck if all the boards are different? If all the pieces of cardboard are different?
Yeah.
Is it the same deck if it's in the same sleeves and it has the same commander? No, no, it's not.
This is clearly very different than what my last Buttercup deck was because we don't say Sissy's name around here anymore. Not in these
No, it's
parts.
Buttercup. It's Buttercup now.
It's Buttercup.
The second half of the conversation here about the deck is what cards did you take out? And in this case, again, new deck, so we have to look at it in a slightly different way. So in this case, I'm going to ask, what cards did you think that you were going to include that ended up kind of on the cutting room floor as you had hashed out what this deck was going to look like?
Well, so since the card pool itself has changed, the list of cards were cards that I am sad to see go.
Okay.
Because they don't have a Joyra Weatherlight Captain in the universes beyond. Why not? What are they waiting for? They had one Weatherlight Captain. Why not the other? Anyway,
Yeah.
we should probably read what Joyra the Weatherlight Captain is.
Does anybody not know? Sorry. Go ahead. For posterity.
For prosperity. So Joy the Weatherlight Captain is a 4 mana legendary human artificer. It's 2 and a blue and a red. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. Man, when like sad to see this go when all your permanents are mostly sad to see such a good card draw engine go. I guess
cast a spell, draw a card.
Oh man, it's almost the same with my next card too. Slightly different, but almost the same. So yeah, I was really sad to see this go because it's just amazing card draw. Like
and really, especially when you're building like the meme kind of deck, having stuff that like allows it to hum, like an engine that gives you enough value to make the kind of suboptimal thing you're doing. Yep. Like you're getting enough kind of gasoline or enough jet fuel to make the thing that shouldn't be going as fast as it is go faster, which then allows it to kind of do its thing, even if the thing it's doing isn't actually game winning. So yeah, this is a good example of that. It would be. Honestly, I hope that it happens at some point because I would love to see it in this deck.
Yeah. So, just. Card's so good. I'm sad to see it go. Like, can we have a moment of silence for our Jorah Weatherlight Captains? Or one for our homies. One of those things. Okay, long enough. So the next card we're going to talk about is an amazing mana rock that I use to efficient. This card is so much better than it sounds. And the card is Chromatic Orrery. So this is a 7 mana legendary artifact that says you may spend mana as though it were any mana of any color. It says tap, add 5 colorless, and then pay 5, tap it, draw cards for each color among permanents you control. This goes great in a 5-color deck when most of your permanents have 3 colors. Or most of your permanents have 2 colors. You find that like getting all 5 colors is really easy. So a lot of the time you're using this for a ramp, but sometimes you're just like, hey, I need 5 cards.
I mean, like you said it as though it were a hesitation. Like this card's better than it seems. I mean, it is expensive to
The 7
cast.
mana is hard to cast.
Sure. Yeah, that
Or I
but
could search it
like
for
it
5.
it puts you right over the top. Like it take you know the premise of taking you from
Yeah.
7 to 12 is huge, and that you can also draw cards on it. I mean, it's also got like a $35 price tag right now.
There's a reason why,
So
yeah.
there's a reason. Like I don't think this is a divisive. I don't think it's controversial to say that Chromatic Orrery is a powerful card.
Yeah,
Most people will
yeah.
go, "Well, yeah, it is."
Yeah. But what makes it even harder for me to see it go, if I was able to get to say +1/+1 from anything else,
Yep.
I was able to for 5 mana search it up and immediately get a second search.
Yep.
Sad to see that capability gone. Like, why have you forsaken me? Oh, wizard gods, please make Chromatic Ori into a Universe Beyond set. Please, I am begging you.
This one is like tailor made for Buttercup. So, I mean, yeah, I would love to see it. I could see why your deck building restriction made this one very hard to let go of.
I cried. It was a hard one for me to get rid of. The next card on my list. This card, it's good, right? It's gotten me out of so many pickles and then immediately put back into pickles like one turn person later. But it's also won me games. This card is
Right.
Primeval's Glorious Rebirth. It is a 7 mana, 5, a white and a black legendary sorcery, which means you may cast a legendary sorcery only if you control a legendary creature or a planeswalker. Hey, I have a lot of those legendary creatures.
You might.
And it says return all legendary permanent cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Hey, things die. Hey, I want them back. I want them all back. When everything down to like this went from excuse me, this deck that it came from, every permanent that wasn't a land was legendary. I also had some legendary lands. So like you blow things up, it's all coming back. Like it's just all going to come back. And turns out some legendary things give everything haste. Who would have thunk it? So it was like a win con for me.
As backbreaking as this card is, I actually think that that in the new version of the deck that it may not have been.
It wouldn't do as
beneficial.
well, but it still would have been pretty awesome.
Right, and not just because you have a lower amount of legendary permanents in the deck, but because I know that the previous version had some built-in kind of kind of mill strategies, like things that were going to put things in your graveyard.
Right, I don't have that as much.
You weren't just relying on things dying, because this kind of thing, mass reanimation, like it's probably not optimal to put in your deck unless you are deliberately putting things in your graveyard through whatever means that is. So the other deck had some like kind of sneaky ways to do that weren't necessarily apparent. This one maybe not so much. So again, I've seen this card do amazing things so many times. I totally agree that it's kind of a sleeper, but I think that
it definitely won't do as well.
I think you may have found that even if you could have run this with your restriction, that you may have found yourself not.
Yeah, it probably would have gotten cut because I can't looking at everything that I have here, I don't know what I would want to cut. Right. Which makes it like
like if you could put Primeval's Glorious Rebirth in, is there something that you think?
I'm not really seeing anything that's like this card's
some
good
of these other ones, obviously, like Joyra was a slam dunk. Like you're finding a place for Joyra. And Chromatic Orrery with Buttercup, with that commander, we know how good that 1-2 punch is. So this one maybe not so much.
And the last card I am devastated to take out. And I know it doesn't say human, I know, but it was Ratadrapic of Urborg. You know who they should. I have a perfect slot for Ratadrabik.
All
Um,
right, tell me.
it should have been the king. I mean, if it were spirits instead of zombies, it should have been the ghost king that Aragorn used in Lord of the Rings.
Yep.
Yep. It's a shame. What were you thinking, Wizards? When are you gonna hire me? I'm
They
still
were
waiting.
thinking that they made all the Lord of the Rings characters unique cards, and they didn't. I guess that's not 100% true.
It's
There are a
mostly
couple
true,
of
yeah.
It's mostly true as far as
But
the named characters
yeah,
go, because that guy does have a card, right? Like he
yeah.
that character does exist in the Magic universe now.
Yeah, so I am a little heartbroken on this one. Again, it wasn't like
Yeah,
I was killing my creatures all that much to get it, but like it's just like another added value piece that's just like insurance to keep my creatures around, right? Because with
yeah. It's like
Ratadrabik, I can just
it's
like
good for legendary tribal, right?
yeah,
Like it is good if all of your creatures are legendary. This reads whenever a creature you control dies, create a token copy of it. It gets replaced by a
yeah,
token copy, which means you can be more aggressive. You can kind of
mhm,
get in and make your opponents make difficult choices in terms of
right.
blocking and things like that. So yeah, this is if you're playing an entirely legendary deck, there's probably a spot for this.
Especially when I'm making, token copies with Father of Synths, or I'm,
Right.
cloning it with Anton soldiers, or things like that. So like there was ways that I could just make it absolutely insane. And God, I'm so glad I can't touch it with a 10-foot pole now, because that's
Yeah,
just so
Ratadravic. We both know
complicated.
We both had Ratadravic decks at one point or another. We
Yeah,
both know how out of the out of pocket this card can get
yeah,
very quickly. It's not hard to break this.
definitely not.
Yeah, in some ways it probably would become central to the deck if we were able to play it. So that makes a lot of sense to me. So now that we've talked about at least a handful of cards, we'll wrap up talking about Zombies deck for now with just a kind of simple summary question. Like, now that you've got the deck list together, how do you feel about like the finished product? How does it different in terms of, I mean, we know the broad,
Mhm.
the broad strokes, but how do you see it as playing different than the previous list?
I'm really excited for the stories that this deck will bring. I'm very
Sure.
excited for the meme thing that I'm gonna do. I'm gonna be like, on your left, Indigo, Avenging Swordsman, and on your right, we're going to see Galadriel, Light of Valinor, or oh, look what I just found on the ring. Look at this shiny one ring. This looks really really nice. Oh no, the storm's shrinking in. I guess we're all gonna die, or you know yeah, I'm not dead. I'm just mostly dead. And being able to quote like movies and TV shows, and just being able to just like hodgepodge it all together and just make this crazy muddy pie is just going to be so hilarious. And I'm really looking forward to just to see some of the reactions that will happen when let's talk about someone I haven't talked about yet. We have Alistair buffing all 10 of my you know um 10th doctors with Sauron the Dark, like the stories that this thing will create, and just like the crossover movies that go through my mind when playing these cards, it just brings joy to my heart. And I think that's something that the last list did, because it was like, oh, all these shrines are doing cool things, and shrines are generally just bad cards, and winning with bad cards just feels kind of funny.
Yes.
Where now it's just like, I want the funny stories, and who gives a crap if I win? It can win, and it can win pretty well if I get to like turn 7 or 8. But
I mean, and oftentimes it's fun to have a deck at that power level. It just is. And this
Mhm.
one, like, I mean, we talk often about the different motivations for building a deck. Like, we both are, I think, skilled enough players that we often optimize a deck, and our first iteration of a deck is really usually pretty powerful,
Right.
even if we're not necessarily playing CEDH levels. Like, we usually lean towards the a pretty optimized version on our first crack, and then oftentimes I think we find ourselves powering it down a little bit
Yeah. Yeah.
so that it doesn't dominate, and it allows for a more kind of interactive and
Hmm.
fulfilling gameplay, because that's the kind of game we're here to play. So
Yeah.
I think that this one will be fun for that reason, and I'm hopeful that just the kind of the goofiness and the novelty of the experience will be fun enough to kind of keep people at that table, and really allowing this deck to kind of get, get some action, and just to see what happens. I
And
mean,
it,
I'm here for the stories too.
and
So
and it just makes that meme that's been going around for years where it's like, oh, I'm playing Magic the Gathering where Luke Skywalker is getting Thor's hammer and smashing face on Mickey or whatever. There's a comic
right,
strip that does that, and that's what this deck is doing. And I
right,
think
yeah,
it's hilarious. It's just a joy, in my opinion, to be
yep.
able to do something like this. So I'm here to make someone stay brighter with a fun story and a tour guide of the
We'll
multiverse.
see if that ends up being the case. As I
Oh,
said,
I'm
I'm
going to be
looking forward to
miserable every
seeing it
time
in
I play
action.
this. Turn 3, I'm just casting my commander, and I'm like, God, this deck sucks.
This deck is so bad.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and segue into Tim's deck. So, what is your general approach for upgrading your decks normally?
I mean, we talked a little bit about it
Hmm.
already. I don't really find myself kind of doing it one bit at a time. I think that as new sets come out, because I love to go and play in pre-releases or to buy just a little bit of kind of sealed product from
Hmm.
each new set, just to kind of see what I get. I do like rolling the dice, gambling a little bit as far as that goes, and sometimes I win and oftentimes I don't, and that's part of the fun for me. It really is.
Hmm.
So usually I'm not necessarily seeking out new cards, but kind of buying some random sealed products or playing in a pre-release, and I'll get some cards and I'll read them and I'll go, hey, wow,
Oh, this
that
works
seems like
here.
it might be a good fit for this other deck. So I will I actually just have an individual box that is kind of my bullpen, if you will. Like,
Hmm.
it's where I'm putting cards that I'm considering for a deck. And they just kind of like fester in there for a while, and then something happens, and I don't know what the something is, but some magical combination of situations and stars aligning and a
Mm.
good dinner or something, and I
I think that
suddenly
good dinner is
feel the
important.
urge to, yeah, to actually sit down and look at my deck and ask myself to, what cards can I take out, what cards am I going to put in. So recently, and as I said, since I'm not doing it all the time, I really do prefer to have those changes be, I'm going to make a couple of changes rather than just doing one card at a time, because really, like, changing one card, what's the likelihood that you're going to see
You're
that
not going to really
card?
see the change, right?
Is it really going to change that? So when you're doing multiple cards, I do think that there's a greater likelihood that you're going to see something different,
Right.
and that, that you'll actually have a different play experience as a result.
Right. So, which commander are you talking about, and what made you want to upgrade this deck in particular?
So today I'm talking about, and did we spotlight this one? We did,
We
right?
did spotlight this one, yeah.
Yeah, so a couple of, one of our previous episodes was on this deck, and it's Hidetsugu and Kairi. It's a Dimir commander, 5 mana for a 5/4 flyer. It's an ogre demon dragon. When Hidetsugu and Kairi enters, you brainstorm. And when it dies, you exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to the card's mana value. If it's an instant or sorcery, you can cast it without paying its mana cost. So the way that I built the deck was to maximize that, and that enters and dies trigger. So basically, I'm trying to get high mana value cards onto the top of my library and then cast them for free, or just fling a whole lot of damage at my opponent's faces, like that. And it really, that is how the deck is trying to win. It's never won by doing combat damage, although I wouldn't put myself against it if that
I
happened.
mean,
Great.
if that's the
Um,
line, that's the line, right?
if that's the line, that's the line. But most of the time, it's going to win with that dice trigger by looping my commander over and over and over. So what made me want to upgrade it? In this situation, there wasn't really a catalyst other than I was looking at that bullpen at that stack of cards that I had, and the deck that had the most new things to add to it was this one. I
Mm.
had built a backlog, and there were a couple of cards that came out in the most recent set in
I
Duskborn
mean, that helps
that were
too.
just really perfect for this specific deck, and that is definitely the catalyst here. Is that you'll notice that I think 3 out of the 4 cards I'm going to talk about adding, and I added a total of 8, and I removed a total of 8. Some of them were just what I would consider to be quality of life improvements.
Sure.
For example, I added a couple of MDFC cards for Modern Horizons 3.
Yeah.
There's a blue MDFC that is a kind of pseudo counterspell, like the kind that puts a spell back in somebody's hand.
Oh,
So
like a
it's really
remand or
like the
something. Yeah.
opportunity cost for having it is very, very low. But I had a couple of MDFCs from buying some Modern Horizons cards. Those aren't the most important changes, but they're in there. So
They're
quality
they're
of life
still
changes.
significant.
They are in this deck especially because the lower the front-facing land count is, the more likely I'm
Right.
actually going to get to a card on the top of the library that's an instant or sorcery. So really having a critical mass of MDFCs really makes sense in this deck uniquely. It's good in a lot of situations, but it's very good here. So really the new set, Duskmourn, lining up with this deck quite a lot, certainly influenced that, but I just had a critical mass of cards I wanted to add.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that happens to us all. But
Mhm.
I'm really excited to talk about some of the cards you have picked out.
Yeah.
So what's the first card so yeah, what's the first card when you decided to upgrade, what changes did you make and what was the new theme if you had a new theme?
Yeah, so the changes that I made were just and I think you'll see it when I give the list. Some of them were just they printed something that does what I want the deck to do, but perhaps in a slightly more efficient way. But in most of the cases, actually, they were cards that were just new and kind of unique that were just so perfect for the goal of the deck as it already existed. So I didn't really change the theme. This is, for all intents and purposes, really just an upgrade where I had cards that I thought
Right.
fit better into what I was trying to accomplish with the deck.
All right. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me because the theme of your deck was solid. Your commander says what your theme of your deck is, so there's really not
Yes.
much to change unless if you're literally just changing the commander. Then at that point it's a different 99 pile of 99, right?
Yeah,
So
I think that you could, because I made myself some restrictions when I built this deck because when I looked at other versions of
sure.
this deck, one of the things that you can definitely do is you can build extra turns.
Mm,
You can really, and there are so many extra turn spells that are actually really high mana values, so they really
right.
do synergize with the commander really, really well. But I don't like playing against extra turns.
Who
So
does?
I wanted to not be that. And the deck still ends up being a little goldfishy. Like I do really spend my turns can be a little circular. I try to move through them as quickly as I can, and I warn people when I'm playing the deck that that is the goal. Is that
Right.
I'm going to create a situation where I'm not in an infinite loop, but I am in a repetitious loop where I continue to do the
Sure.
same thing until I fizzle or until everybody's dead.
Yeah.
But like I could have changed the theme and added some of that stuff in, but that's not what I was going for today.
That seems smart. So we're gonna go ahead and start going into the cards that we add that you added to your deck list, and this first one is
Yes, I saved the best
spicy
for first.
because this card is
Uh,
spicy. I don't know if you
I
guys.
might even say, I might even say that this card is what motivated me to make
Uh,
the upgrade
that's
because I
see. I thought you were gonna specifically say, "Hey, this card was the catalyst that was like, okay, it's time to go. It's time to
it
upgrade.
really
It is time to
it, I
crank
think
this."
I might be. I definitely there were other cards and I will get to them. There are other cards that are also amazing. There's one in particular that I think is it does not do the same thing that this card does at all, but it really is effective. It really, again, synergizes with the deck incredibly well. But this was it. So I am talking about Ancient Cellar Spawn. So this was in one of the Duskmourn commander decks. It is a 3 black, 3 mana value, 1 and 2 black. It's a 3/3 enchantment creature horror. Each spell that you cast that's a demon, a horror, or a nightmare costs 1 less to cast. Whenever you cast a spell, if the amount of mana spent to cast it was less than its mana value, target opponent loses life equal to the difference.
Hey, weird. Does your commander say you cast spells for free?
It does. And so
Wow.
this effectively makes it doubles the damage of my commander's dies trigger. Also, it makes demons cheaper. So it
It's a
actually makes the
pan.
commander come out a turn earlier.
It's a pan Hidetsugu Akan. Because it's doubling
Seriously,
it's doubling Hidetsugu's
it
trigger.
doubles the die trigger. And it doubles the damage. And there's actually, as I discovered, other things in my deck that can trigger off of this card. I really felt when I saw this that they had printed it specifically for me. I was like, they looked into my dreams and hopes. I actually never would have imagined a card like this. But I'm so glad that it exists
Mhm.
and that I was able to slot it into the deck. It is perfection. I've already got to play it in one game, and I was 100% right that this left unchecked with my commander makes me win faster. And that's
Very
really what I was
fast.
hoping for, is I wanted to create a sense of inevitability. So obviously, this is a little bit of ramp because it does make my commander in particular faster. It makes it cost less. But it is really that second half where when I cast spells, if I'm casting the spells for free, I'm flinging their mana value at people's faces. So
Seems
I
pretty
really,
solid.
it really makes the clock faster.
Yeah. When I saw that in play, it was just like this deck. This card is made for this deck. Like they were like
Hmm.
a couple of sets late, but we finally got there.
We did.
Oh my god! It's almost been 2 years. So when they were like, "Oh, that's what it is," they were like, "You know what? There's one card, Hidetsugu and Kairi needs, but we're 2 years ahead, so we need to." It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
It's inevitable. It's coming. Anyway, so let's go ahead and get into the next card. I'm
So the next
yeah.
card, also from Duskmourn, is less flashy, but still very fun. It's called Come Back Wrong. It's 2 and a black. It's a sorcery. It reads destroy target creature. If a creature card was put into the graveyard this way, return it to the battlefield under your control, and then sacrifice it at the end of your next on your next end step.
You just target your own
So
commander, don't you?
yes. So this really, it actually performs double duty. Like, so I actually could take out a removal spell and put this card in
Mhm.
instead. And listen, it's a bad removal spell. Let's not, let's not make any mistakes about this. It's not a great removal spell. It's 3 mana to remove a creature is not a great rate. But the other side of it is that, like, if I see somebody across the table who has a creature with a fantastic enters the battlefield trigger, now I get to do that. I get to remove that creature from their board, get the entered the battlefield trigger, and then it dies for on my end step.
Funny story. It
But
steals
it has
commanders.
yeah.
It steals
So
commanders.
it steals commanders. At least
For a turn,
at least
but
for a
it
turn.
steals a commander.
Right. Now, I think that the way that do I get
Yeah,
it,
you
or do they
absolutely
get
do
to choose
because
to?
the reason it goes into the graveyard and then once state-based actions are done, that's when it would move to the command zone. But since this resolves before state-based actions are checked,
You get it for at least the turn.
it's
Okay.
no longer in the graveyard for you to move to exile.
So there's other stuff I could do at that point. This deck is full of clone effects, so I could steal their commander, clone it, and lots of things. But you were right the first time. The real reason it's in there is because I can target my own commander. I can destroy my commander, get its dies trigger, get it back onto the battlefield, get
Oh,
another
you
enters
then
the
have a
battlefield, and keep.
brainstorm trigger on top. Ugh.
That's right. And you
Ugh.
keep it just keeps the loop going. So again, it's just one more. There's so much redundancy in this deck, so this is a little bit of a redundant piece, but I think that at the cost of removing a targeted removal spell that I didn't necessarily, I want to have some interaction,
Mhm.
but this is interaction that also plays into my game plan.
Oh yeah, yeah, and like this is a good way to kind of like end it, like where it's like, okay, after this, I don't really have any more mana. I don't think I can go much further. This then just says, hey, we're gonna get one more peek of your top card
Yep.
before you die a miserable,
Hmm.
painful death, because that's what will happen.
Yeah, it certainly will. And it's very flavorful too. Like I love the like horror theme of
Hmm.
Duskmourn,
Yeah,
and so adding at least a little bit of that into the Hidetsugu deck felt very fitting.
yeah, it's pretty solid. So, uh, we're gonna go into the next card, and this card just seems really, really good.
There
Duskmourn.
were two
Turns out
there were
Duskmourn was a
two
pretty solid set.
Yeah, so there's I only talked about four cards that I'm adding. Like I said, I did actually enter a total of eight new cards. And in addition to the three that I'm talking about, this being the third one, there's two more. So five out of eight of the cards were from Duskmourn or the Duskmourn Commander set, and this is one of two rooms that I added. So it's called Mirror Room or Fractured Realm. So the first half of the room is two in a blue. When you unlock this door, create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except it's a reflection in addition to its other creature types.
I wonder
So
who
if you know
you're
how
gonna
the deck
pick.
works, I use clone effects to copy the commander. I let the copy die. I get both the enters and dies triggers in whatever order I want to. That's really what the deck is trying to
Hmm.
do. It's trying to land the commander and then hit it with clone effects, so I get both of those effects.
Right.
So 3 mana for a clone effect is actually a fantastic
Great
rate.
rate. Yeah.
It is among the lowest amount that you have to pay to make that happen. So the first half of this card is just easily as good as lots of other 3 mana clones that I have in
Hmm.
the deck. What makes it so much better is that it is a split card that's actual mana value is 10
Ugh.
because the other half of it is Fractured Realm, which is 5 and 2 blue. If a triggered ability of a permanent you control triggers, that ability triggers an additional time.
Oh, stop it! No way. Am I hearing this correctly? Stop it,
Yeah,
Wizards!
is this
What are you doing?
they printed these two cards just for me. So this is listen, it's not an instant or sorcery, so you can't cast it for free. But if you happen to accidentally hit it with a dice trigger, you dome somebody for 10. So like that's the floor, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's the worst case scenario with this card being in the deck. The best case scenario is I use it to copy my commander early on in the game,
Mm-hmm.
and if
Hmm.
the game goes long enough, I make it so that the triggers get doubled later on, and I get to kill people even faster.
Wow.
So, really, this was an easy slide in to replace a 3 mana clone. Also, it wasn't hard for me to slot in. I
Look,
just found the 3 mana clone I liked the least
let's quasi
and shipped it
duplicate.
out.
It's gone now. Oh no, what happened? I don't know.
Right.
Quasi duplicate's really good, actually. Now that I'm thinking about it.
No, I prioritized removing creature based ones
Yeah.
because the instant and sorcery based ones create the loop. But yeah, so this room is perfect. The other one is the demon room that's shaken up standard right now. Also very good, but I think this one was the one really worth talking about
Oh,
today.
absolutely. That card's silly. All right, we're gonna go into the last card that you added, and this is just a super easy why you included it.
Yeah,
We kind of
it's
talked about it
quality of
already.
life, right? Yeah, it's
Uh,
quality of life in improvements, right? So so what we're talking about is Flesh Duplicate. It's from the Doctor Who precons. It's 2 blue for a shapeshifter rebel. You may have Flesh Duplicate enter the battlefield as a copy of any creature on the battlefield, except it has Vanishing 3 if that creature doesn't have Vanishing. So this is effectively a 2 mana clone, and since my clone effects are meant to die, this is the
I
cheapest
don't. I
clone
don't
that
think vanishing 3 matters. Yeah, there's only one other
it
clone that I can think of that costs 2, and I'm pretty sure you have it in your list too. So
I do. I do. It's the
yeah,
Phantasmal image.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So another 2 mana clone. This again, very easy to find a slot for it. I just found a middle of the road clone that, didn't have an upside that was worth it. And I just took that out and replaced it with this. I just basically lowered my curve with this
It
card.
sounds like you had a
So
pretty easy time picking cards to remove.
just to some extent, I did. Some of them were a little bit harder than others, and as we go into the back half here, we'll see at least a little bit of that. But I think that I didn't have a super hard time. No.
No, yeah, it looked pretty simple. Now I could imagine like the last 2 or 3 cards being hard, because that's always the case. Like always the
I mean,
case.
as I said, a lot of so 8 cards I added. 3 of them were
Like just strictly better
one of
versions of stuff you already
right.
had.
I was so 3 of them were which I didn't mention any of those 3 because they're not really exciting to talk about. One of them's just a land. Like I got,
Mhm.
there's a new black blue kind of dual land in Duskmourn, and I think it's strictly better than a lot of the other ones I was playing, so I just slotted that out. And then there's 2 I added 2 MDFCs, which really I think I took lands out for them.
Yeah, that makes a lot
So
of sense.
easy.
So we're gonna finally go into the cards that you removed that we think were interesting enough to actually talk about. So,
Yeah.
what's the first card you picked?
So the first one I took out, and a lot of it had to do with the being on the fence with this card to begin with, and it's Vesuvan Duplimancy. It's an enchantment. It's 3 and a blue. Whenever you cast a spell that targets only a single artifact or creature you control, create a token that's a copy of that artifact or creature, except it's non-legendary. So basically, you target a creature of yours with a spell, and you create a non-legendary copy of that. So the deck plays with a lot of clone
I
effects,
could
which don't
see.
always target.
I could see why you got
Some
rid
of
of
them
this.
do, but some of them don't. It also plays with a lot of I don't know what to call them,
The
but kind
Feign
of
Death stuff.
undying.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the one black mana, this creature comes back if it dies this turn effects. There's quite a number of those as well. So you create so the problem that I kept running into is that I actually want the copies to be legendary.
Yeah.
I
I
just
think that's
do.
the biggest part of it. Yeah.
It really changed it for me, and I just often found that the deck is already difficult to pilot because it is kind of a loop.
hmm
So this made it complicated enough that it made me play it slower. And so every time I got this card, I didn't want to play it because it made it so complicated that I
Right.
ended up with all these extra triggers, and that's not really what I wanted to do. It's easier when it is a loop
Right.
that again it doesn't there is an infinite in the deck for inevitability. Really, I put it in there just so that I could make sure that I could end a game if I needed to. But most of the time I don't need to go infinite. I just need to do the loop a couple of
Right.
times, and this just made the loop more complicated. And so as I was looking, I was like, do I just want to put another clone effect in this place? And that ended up being the answer to it.
Yeah. I mean, also the setup cost. It's 4 mana to do nothing.
I agree.
So you almost need to have 5 mana and your commander out in order for you to start something. And then that something kind of fizzles out quickly because the second one you're creating is just a non-legendary copy. So you would have to then have a third piece to make it even better. But then is that not just win more at that point?
Yeah, you're so right. Like the setup cost was too high. The payout wasn't doing more than what I was already doing. So at that point, I'm spending mana to effectively not do anything extra.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, the more I played with it, the more I was like, every time I see this card, I think to myself, I wish this was another clone effect. And then they printed a couple new ones, and I said, okay, it's time for me to make that change.
Yeah, it seems pretty smart. So I'm interested to see why you removed this piece. So what's the next card we're going to talk about?
So the next card we're talking about is Burnished Heart. It is 3. Most Commander players are familiar with it. 3 mana for an artifact creature elk. It's a 2/2. You can pay 3, sacrifice it, search for 2 basic lands, put them into the battlefield tapped. So it's a ramp piece.
Sure.
And in blue and black, you don't get a lot. You don't get a lot of very good ramp pieces. And I'll tell you, the reason that I pulled this is I needed a creature slot for Ancient Cellar Spawn.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense.
There are not a lot of creatures in this deck,
No,
and most of them are clones. And so as I was looking through the creature list, it was this or Solemn Simulacrum.
I think Sad Robot's better 100%.
And the reason that I picked Sad Robot is that it has an enters and dies trigger.
Hmm.
And so it is actually a fair clone target, where
Right.
this one is more mana intensive. Sure, you can clone it. You still have to have the 3 mana sacrifice it to
Mhm.
get its ability. Whereas if you're cloning Sad Robot, you immediately get the ETV that gets
Right.
you the land out. So I really felt like Solemn Simulacrum turned all of my clones into ramp spells, where this did not.
That
Where
makes a
this
lot
turned
of
them all into
sense.
very expensive ramp spells. So, and again, looking at Ancient Seller Spawn, calling it ramp is not accurate. Really, I think I'd have to look, but I don't think there's any other demons in the
But
deck.
but but I
So
will say the most important spell in your deck is your commander. That's how you win.
that's right.
So it is a ramp spell,
That's
and it's the ramp spell for the most important card of your deck, which in
that's
my
fair.
eyes is good enough for me.
And it cost 3. Like, it just ended up fitting. It was very hard to find a creature spot because the deck also relies on having a certain amount of instants and sorceries in it. So I
Right.
really didn't want to I didn't want to up the creature count. I wanted to find a creature spot to slot Ancient Seller Spawn into. So this was the pick. This is what ended up being the thing that I pulled. And there's a lot of pieces that go into that. I do have one other creature that I pulled here in a moment,
Yeah. I can
but
see why
really,
this one
like,
was gone too.
I see this as the card that Ancient Seller Spawn replaced.
Like I'm actually surprised that, like, not saying that this card is bad. I was just surprised to see it in your list, like,
Yep.
in general, because like the payoff that well, go ahead and read the next card, and then we can talk about
You're saying
why.
you're surprised to see Sedgemoor Witch in the list?
No, like just in the list period. Like I was surprised to see it in the original 99.
Yes.
Because like
Okay. So Sedgemoor Witch, which is from Strixhaven, it's 2 and a black. It's a 3/2 human warlock with menace. Got ward for pay 3 life. Has Magecraft, so whenever you cast or copy an instant or sorcery, you make a 1/1 black or green pest creature token with when this creature dies, gain 1 life. I gotta be honest, I don't know why
honestly,
this was in the original list.
because I think the original idea, like, I mean, this is probably something that just was there when you first built the list, right? Because it's a good Magecraft card in general, but like, you don't care about those 1/1 tokens, and I could see why initially it seemed like a good idea because you are casting a lot of spells, but again, the payoff that you're getting isn't important at all. So like,
No,
this
I
being
think
such a fast remove, like, yeah, oh, 100%.
I think that there is a part of me as a standard player that is
That'll do.
trying to be mindful of different kind of situations that are likely to come up in the meta, right?
Mhm.
And the problem with that in Commander is that this might be controversial to say, but there is no meta.
No,
Like
absolutely not.
that isn't how it works. Like, you have no idea most of the time. We play a lot of online. You have no idea what table you're going to be at. You have no idea what kind of other people are going
Right.
to bring. So my mind was, I'm playing a deck that is practically creatureless, where I have 1 creature on
Hmm.
board, maybe 2. If I'm playing against anything that's like a go wide strategy, they're going to run me over. And the reality is, I don't care.
You can run me over for the first 4 turns because when I get to turn 5, you're dead.
That's essentially it, is
Yeah.
that the deck is going to it's got that sense of inevitability that if I get myself set up, it doesn't matter what you've done so far, it doesn't matter what I've done so far. If you don't have a way to interact with my combo in a meaningful way, there's a very high likelihood that I'm just going to loop you to
I
death.
mean, your
So
combo is really hard to interact with anyway, just as a whole.
it
So,
So Sedgemoor Witch was probably in there because, as you said, I had one sitting around. I was like, I'm going to be casting lots of instants and sorceries. It turns all of my instants and sorceries into creatures that really gum up the board. So I think that there was a lot of benefit to that. But when I was looking for pulls, looking for creatures that could come out, I was, as I'm looking through the list, I came across this one and said, I know that this one can go because I don't think it's as important to the game
Right.
plan, and I really want to have enough cards that do the clone effects or the bring back from the graveyard effects. Any of those things are
Right.
more valuable.
Yeah, I agree with that. And again with the next card, like with the cards that we've talked about, it just makes sense.
Yep. This is easy. So the last card on my pulled from the deck list is Mirror Image. It's 2 and a blue for a shapeshifter. You may have it enter as a copy of any creature you control. So it's a 3-mana shapeshifter. So we all know why this came out. This came out because I found 2 other versions of this card, both Mirror Room and Flesh Duplicate. Let's honor the fact that Mirror Image is an uncommon, right?
You did
Like
it.
it's meant to be like a kind of middly version of this. So they printed a rare and mythic version that are better in different ways. Either of them make this one look weaker by comparison.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
really, if you look at the deck list, I have an enormous amount of redundancy in the deck. So it's not like I needed more clones. It just when I
There's
asked
just
myself
better now, right?
what is the worst one? And it
Yeah.
ended up being this one, surprisingly. Even at 3 mana, there are some that cost more, but their upside is just so great.
Yeah.
But this one is just all it does is this.
And
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 so
this
it
this
ended
one's
up
even
being the
worse
pull.
because it's a creature you control. So like
Oh, it
this
is.
kit
You're right.
like this doesn't even save you in a pinch either, right? Like this
That's
is
right.
a strictly win more clone to me. So yeah, like every card that you pulled out, the only concern I had with Burnished Heart was, I mean, technically you added a ramp piece, but did you? And like, were any of the other cards that you added in ramp? And also, how important is ramp to you? Because realistically speaking, you only have to get to 6 or 7 mana, and you're potentially winning the game.
So the loop is never guaranteed, right? And so, like, if the
Yeah.
deck is doing exactly what it wants to, I have a sacrifice engine in play,
Hmm.
and I am creating. I'm having either a clone or a return from the
Yep.
graveyard effect that is allowing me to continue
Right.
sacrificing and reanimating my commander over and over and over again. So I think that it is also a high mana value deck where a lot of the cards at the top end are extraordinarily high
Hmm.
mana value. So how important is ramp? It is also blue and black, which is notoriously bad at ramp.
Right.
So in a format that's very mana hungry, it can be really tough. So I think that you're onto it. Like, I think your head's in the right place where it is probably not as important for this deck as it is for many others. Because if I can get my commander on the battlefield and get it to stick, like
As long as it
essentially
doesn't
if
get
I can get
countered, right, you're generally okay.
as long as it doesn't get countered or exiled.
Yep.
Um, because again, like if I have a sacrifice outlet, great. But I don't always. And
Right.
so sometimes, people have Path to Exile, one of the most popular cards in the format. They have Swords to Plowshares, one of the
That's
most
true.
popular cards in the format. So it does happen. And then my commander costs a lot, costs 7.
Yeah.
So it's a trade-off. I mean, Burnished Heart is one of the only, like, kind of, well, not one of the only, but it is a artifact-based ramp piece that moves you forward quite a lot. So I played the deck at least once
Hmm.
since I made the upgrades, and I was actually real. I felt like I was behind, like I was not doing a lot, and then
You
I came
missed
out of nowhere
land,
and
but
won.
you missed like 2 or 3 land drops, and we were all like,
Did I?
yeah, and we
Yep.
were like, Tim, it's okay, we'll leave you alone. And then
Just
Tim's like,
leave him alone.
you're all dead.
Everyone was tapped out too. It was like,
Uh,
okay, and I remember starting the turn, going like, all right, I'm gonna give it a go.
the question
I don't have everything.
is this lethal? That's what this deck asks. Is this lethal? Let's find
Yeah,
out next
let's
time
find out.
on.
And it was Ancient Cellar Spawn,
Yeah.
first clone effect, loop, 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 and everybody dies. So like it definitely I think the changes are positive, generally speaking. I think that a couple of them are like really spectacular. Ancient Cellar Spawn is an immediate all-star in the deck. I'm gonna hope to get it every single game.
Right.
And a lot of the other ones are just quality of life improvements. So, I think that the deck performs as well as I would like it to. I'm very
Good.
happy with this deck.
Good. Alrighty. I think now is a good time to start wrapping things up.
Yeah, that's about it. So, friends, opponents, we want to thank everyone for saving the daylight recently. Listen, every year it feels like we're going to lose the daylight, and then we turn our clocks back and we save it. Every year,
It
we're all
works.
heroes.
Wow.
But really, thank you for spending time with us on the Head Games Commander podcast. Remember, you can support this show, all of our other content, by watching this and other videos on our YouTube page, by checking out our streams on Twitch and YouTube, and always hitting that like and subscribe button, put some comments. All those things are very helpful. You can find links in the description.
And before we scoop things up, we want to hear from you, the think tank. How do you upgrade your favorite decks? Let us know in the comments below. And as always, thank you for playing along with us and have a wonderful day. Bye.